Welcome. Today, we're here to learn about and recite the preamble to the U.S. Constitution. My name is Rachel Dranowski, and I'm the coordinator of the Michigan Supreme Court Learning Center. Thank you to our live audience here on Constitution Day. We're connecting with schools from many different places, including Augrey, White Pigeon, Muskegon, Holland, Zeeland, Greater Lansing, Jackson, Howell, Holly, and Metro Detroit. During this program, we'll introduce the preamble, read the actual words, and then ask questions about the Constitution. Justice Richard Bernstein of the Michigan Supreme Court will join us for the Q&A. To set the scene, I want to take you back to the Constitutional Convention, a special meeting in 1787 in Philadelphia, where delegates, men sent by their states, met to fix the federal government. Things weren't going well for the United States. In fact, the federal government couldn't pay its bills, and states were ready to go to war with each other. It was up to men like George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, Alexander Hamilton, and James Madison to bring the United States together. Imagine sitting in this very room all summer with the doors and windows shut without air conditioning. You're assigned to work on a group project, but people don't get there on time, and some leave early because they disagree with what's being done. Instead of following the assignment, fixing the Articles of Confederation, they do something different. Start over and write a new constitution, a totally new plan for government. The delegates discussed many issues during the convention and settled on 3 branches of government. To explain the purpose of the Constitution, they began with a short preamble. The preamble is the part most people recognize, up at the top. It starts, "We the people." That shows the power or the authority of government comes from the people. As President Abraham Lincoln said in the Gettysburg Address many decades later, government is of the people, by the people, for the people. The preamble also lists 5 big ideas, the purposes of the Constitution. Finally, it says the Constitution will be a lasting document for posterity, for people like you and me who are not even born yet. The purposes of the Constitution are to unify the nation and make it one, assure justice or fairness under the law, maintain peace, defend the nation, and protect society and our way of life. These are ideals, the best of what the Constitution should do and be. Since 1787, there's been debate about what these purposes mean and the best way to achieve them. Here are the 52 words of the preamble. I'm going to give you a moment to look at them. Then I'll review words and phrases, including the ones that match with the purposes I just spoke about. Follow along as I read the highlighted words. Think about the purposes of the Constitution. More perfect union. Justice. Domestic tranquility. Common defense. General welfare. Blessings of liberty. Posterity. Do ordain and establish. Constitution. Now, let's read the preamble. Say it phrase by phrase as we the people, together from our locations across Michigan. I hope that you enjoy and see that we are working together. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Thank you to we the people for reminding us of the purposes of the Constitution. Now, let's find out what you want to know about the Constitution. Justice Richard H. Bernstein has been a member of the Michigan Supreme Court, our state's highest court since 2015. Thank you, Justice Bernstein. We'll start with our first question. What's the most important thing people should know about the purpose of the Constitution?
Well, good morning, everybody. And I have to say, I am so excited to be with you guys today. And before I kind of jump in and answer the question, I just want to hope that all of you are weathering this pandemic and that you're getting through this as best as you possibly can. And ultimately, it's just, I'll share something really quick with you. As a blind person, you know, it's very challenging because it can be very isolating during a pandemic. So I'm certain a lot of you are probably having those same feelings and those same emotions of difficulty or sadness or challenge. And I just want you to know that whatever your emotion is in this, it's something that we're all going through. And so me as a Supreme Court Justice is sharing that same challenge and that same difficulty and that same agony that you must all be feeling each and every day. And that leads us to kind of the question about the Constitution. And I think when you think about what the Constitution means and what the Constitution is, it's really about people. And it's really about making sure that people are represented within government. Because ultimately, what is government? Government is a structure by which we live. It's a code that we all have to adhere to. And what the Constitution ultimately does is it allows for us to establish a system that we all live by that hopefully can be as fair and as equitable as we can hopefully attempt to make it. So when you think about the Constitution, it's really a document that ultimately allows for you to live under a sense of self-governance and ultimately allows for us to live under a structure of government and under a structure that basically was designed to allow for people to have a sense of representation, but ultimately a sense of contribution to their government. And the Constitution also affords us certain rights and protections. And many would say that one of the most important parts of the Constitution are the Bill of Rights, which is the first 10 amendments of the Constitution. And that was when the founders came together, they said, we're going to establish governance. But as we establish governance, we have to make sure that government doesn't usurp or overreach its powers. So we're a very unique country in that we basically have what they call the Bill of Rights, which is to ultimately allow for government to be established and to be created, while at the same time making sure that people's individual rights and liberties are ultimately protected.
Thank you, Justice Bernstein. I have a question from the students, and one of them was, did people disagree about the Constitution?
That is a wonderful question. And you know what? Just like with anything, there's always going to be some disagreements. And I think that's a good thing. You know, ultimately, when you're trying to create a document that basically is going to set up the way that we live and ultimately guide us throughout the ages, and it's the same way at the court as well, the most important thing you can have is different life experiences. The more life experiences that are brought into something, the more you're able to have discussions, the more you're able to understand and appreciate other people's issues and other people's concerns. And ultimately, there's a number of different things that came into the Constitution that we could go into in greater detail if you'd like, that are a form of compromise. You had an issue of, questions about the small states versus the big states, and representation structures where basically people said, well, if you're going to do it based off of population, then certain states are going to have more representation than others. And that's why, you have a formulation of government that basically was designed so that there's a balance between big states and small states, and, and the question of individual rights and freedoms and liberties and all these different things were taken into account when they created the Constitution. And I think the lesson that really comes out of this that we can all adhere to is that it's actually a really positive thing to have disagreements. It's actually a really positive thing to have disputes. It's actually a really positive thing to kind of not see everything in a uniformed way. And that often is the case that the more you have conversation, the more you have discussion, the more that people are able to talk about different things, the more you're able to then come up with a new approach or a new way of looking at things that allows for things to work. And I think the lesson for that we can all take is that disagreement is completely fine as long as it's not taken personal, as long as it's not bitter, and as long as it's just kind of a shared way of trying to reach a consensus. Disagreement and different perspectives can ultimately be, I think, an incredibly beneficial thing if it's done in a creative, positive, upbeat way, because it allows for everyone to benefit from the experiences and concerns that are all brought to the table at once.
All right, here's another question. This is sort of a hypothetical. Do you have any thoughts about what might have become of the United States if the Constitution had not been written?
Oh, that is a fantastic question. I have to say, guys, I want you to know that this has been the highlight of my entire week, just so you guys know. I'll do this with you all day long whenever you guys want to do it, because I am enjoying this so much. I think that ultimately you would not have had a United States if you didn't have the Constitution, because at the end of the day, the Constitution is really an idea. And it's not just about a document. It's not just about a piece of paper, but it's really about an idea, because you have to go back and kind of think about, why did we create a country? We created a country because people came here because they were in search of something better. They didn't want to have a king. They wanted a better life. They wanted to have individual rights and freedoms. They wanted the opportunity to be able to worship. They wanted to basically set a course for their own destiny. And if you really think about what America is, it's really a pioneering spirit. We're a frontier society. We're people that love and crave adventure. We're a people that love to build and create. And ultimately, I think the way that I'd answer that question is simply to say that I believe that the Constitution is really, for all intents and purposes, really an embodiment of the spirit of a nation, the beauty of a nation, the enthusiasm of a nation, and the kind of individuality of a nation. So I think that ultimately the Constitution is really a byproduct of the people that create it, and it goes into the spirit that allows for us to live the way that we live now.
All right, here's a question for you, Justice Bernstein.
Yes.
Someone would like to know if you've seen the musical Hamilton. And if you have, what do you think are the most important parts that are accurate?
That is a fantastic question. I love these questions. Well, I have to say that I'm probably one of the very few people who has not seen Hamilton. So I don't really know. I know kind of I kind of know, I have to say there's a wonderful kind of story behind the creation of Hamilton, which was the creator was at the White House and he was meeting with President Obama. And he said to the president, he said, Mr. President, when the president asked, so what is going to be your next creation? What's going to be your next project? And he said, well, I'm going to do a wonderful hip hop story about Alexander Hamilton. And President Obama's response back was, well, good luck with that, which I just love. So I have not had the opportunity to see Hamilton, but my understanding is that it's somewhat very, very much incredibly accurate. But what I love is it really brings things to life, and it allows for people to realize the significance of our history, but most importantly, all the different people who played a role kind of in the history of Hamilton. And my understanding, again, I haven't seen it yet, but one of these days I would love to see it. But I think my favorite character from the soundtrack that I've heard is the King, because he just seems like a really funny, I just love that kind of fun, kind of spirited character. But no, unfortunately, I can't give you an in-depth analysis of Hamilton. I haven't seen it, but you have now given me an excuse to try to go and see it.
Excellent. Here's a question, and I
Yes.
think the question is were there more people who wanted to be part of the Constitution? And I think the question has to do with who were the founders and who didn't get to be part of the founders.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that that's an excellent question. I mean, think about it. You know, a lot of folks what you have to realize about our founding fathers is that they were products of our time. And like when I say that, you know, ultimately we are all products of our own experiences, right? And in many situations, you had people that were slave owners at that time. So ultimately, you had huge numbers of people. African Americans, of course, you know, weren't really included in this. Native Americans weren't really included in this. And I think it really is an excellent question that you asked. I'm so glad that you brought that question, you know, up in this forum. And you know why that is? Because it really goes to, I think, some of the challenges and some of the struggles that we're having today, is because even when you look at the creation and the inception of the U.S. Constitution, because of the fact that it didn't have kind of input or buy-in from all the different people that were ultimately going to be living under it, that's why I think you see a lot of the tensions that come today. And that's why whenever you're in a courtroom, when you're ever making a decision, whenever you're trying to set forth policy, whether it's constitutional or judicial or congressional, whatever it is, as a blind person, you know, I kind of look at this from this perspective as well, is that you need as many experiences from as many people as possible, because that's the whole essence of diversity. The more people that are part of a solution, the more people that are part of building something or creating something, the more people that are part of, you know, making decisions that affect the lives of countless numbers of people, the better it's going to be for all people. So in that situation, per your question, you're absolutely right. There were lots of folks that didn't really have the opportunity to participate in this process for the reasons that we've discussed and for what you're learning in history. And I think as a result, that's why we're having some of the struggles and difficulties that will still kind of be with us today. But I think what we can learn from this as we go into the future is that people are going to have more buy-in, people are going to have more input, people are going to have more say. And as a result of that, we're going to have a better, stronger, and more beautiful place for us all to live and ultimately be a part of. These are excellent questions. I got to tell you guys, the hardest thing about a pandemic for a blind person is I just so wish I could be there with you in person. Because for blind people, it's so difficult because we feel people's energy. And during a pandemic, the fact that we can't be around people or we can't be close to people makes it really hard for us because we can't feel the energy that exists. And I am willing to bet that you guys have a wonderful, warm, enthusiastic energy. And the only thing that makes me sad is that we can't be there in person today to experience it together.
All right, I have another question.
Yes, please.
This one has to do with, someone knows that we both live in Michigan. We live under both the U.S. Constitution and under the Michigan Constitution, and they want to know which is longer, the U.S. Constitution or the Michigan Constitution?
That's a great question. You know, in terms of actual page limits, I can't really answer in terms of page limits, but what I can tell you is that the one thing is that the distinction between the Michigan Constitution and the U.S. Constitution is that the Michigan Constitution has been ratified. I believe there was a convention back in the 60s. So ultimately, we actually have had a more recent constitutional convention. So, you know, I would say that the Michigan Constitution has actually been ratified due to our kind of constitutional convention that happened kind of, you know, in the 60s, whereas that hasn't yet occurred with the U.S. Constitution. So I'm not really sure kind of which one you would ultimately say is longer. But what's really interesting is the way I could answer that question is that in whatever constitution you're adhering to, whether it's the state constitution or whether it's the federal constitution, a state constitution must never take away rights. A state constitution can add rights. So you can have a state constitution that creates more rights for people. But what's really interesting about a state constitution is a state constitution cannot take away rights that are guaranteed to you by the federal constitution. But I have to say, guys, you guys are asking fabulous questions.
Okay. Our next question is specifically, you are a justice of the Michigan Supreme Court. How did you get to become a justice?
Oh, guys, that is such a great question. I'm so glad you asked that. So this is a really interesting topic of conversation because the way that it works in Michigan is we actually elect our judges. So a person like myself, I'm actually elected to this position. So think about that, which is really interesting because, you know, in other situations, like for the federal Supreme Court, for the U.S. Supreme Court, those folks are actually appointed, which means that, you know, that someone makes a decision or determination, and then they are appointed and then confirmed by the Senate. In Michigan, the way that we do it is that anyone that wants to serve on the highest court has to stand for election. And that means that the over 10 million people who live here in the great state of Michigan, they are the ones who get to decide who represents them on the state's highest court. And there's always a really interesting conversation that goes back and forth, which is, well, is it better to elect judges or is it better to appoint judges? And you know, I think per your question, I actually think elections are the better way to go because what elections require a judge to do is to connect, to understand, to relate, and to basically have the chance to really be close to the people that they represent. So when you're elected, it requires you to go and spend time with people, get to know people, hear the struggles and challenges and difficulties that people are faced with. So we here in Michigan elect our judges. And that is distinctive from what you will hear in the federal system where judges are actually chosen and then appointed.
Let's see. Is there something that you think that everyone would be surprised about the Constitution? Maybe even compare it to other constitutions around the world, if you're able to do that.
Yes, well, I think that, you know, I think there's a lot of surprises. I think, you know, one of the key things is, you know, for the most part, our Constitution has lasted for a very long time. I mean, we are, you know, if you look at other countries across the world, what's really interesting about the United States compared to that of, you know, other nations, which I think is really interesting, is that we might be a young country in terms of kind of when we were established compared to, like, you know, countries like Italy or countries like Greece, you know, or countries, you know, across the world. But what's fascinating is that technically our system of government and our Constitution is the longest lasting. So even though we're kind of a younger country compared to other countries that have been around and civilizations that have been around for hundreds, in certain situations, thousands of years, we are operating, for many situations, as the oldest country because our system of government has actually withheld the test of time. And think about what it's been able to withhold. Like, I want you to be optimistic and inspired because I realize that there's a lot of challenges and struggles that we're going through. I realize there's a lot of difficulties that people are facing. I realize that with the pandemic and all the other issues that are kind of befalling us right now. But if you really want to be inspired, our system of government, even though it's definitely being challenged right now, has withheld the test of time. Our system of government has withheld more challenges and more difficulties than you could ever possibly imagine. And I believe that no matter how hard things get, no matter how distressing things get, our system of government, our way of life will always prevail. And the reason is not just because of the Constitution. It's because of who we are as a people. And it's the people that make up a country. And Americans are warm, and they're kind, and they're generous, and they're enthusiastic, and they're idealistic, and they have good spirits and good-natured, no matter what party or side of the aisle people are on. Americans have this general excitement and enthusiasm and an inherent optimism for life. And there's always been an American spirit that's been admired across the world. And I will have to say that in answer to your question, it is the fact that we have longevity and that we are a resilient people that will allow for us to carry forward indefinitely.
Well, Justice Bernstein, I think we can't end on a better note than that. Our time is almost up. I know there are a bunch of wonderful questions that are still in the Q&A, but everyone has places to be next. We will make sure and save all of those questions and follow up by email with all of our teachers who have signed up. I want to thank you, Justice Bernstein, for your time and your expertise, and I want to thank everyone for participating today. We really enjoyed connecting with you. All right, and if you want to do more with the Learning Center, you can find more live programs and other resources anytime on our website. That's courts.mi.gov/learning center. Thank you so much for joining us.